Hello, welcome back to our channel. In case you're new here, this is Story Time with Nana Len and Glow. Now, our good friend Glow started reading Another's Treasure. She has been called away, and I will read a couple chapters for her. And then we'll probably take turns from there because she's going to be a bit busy. Well, with the holidays coming up, we're both going to be busy. But okay, so I believe she left you at chapter 6. So here we go. The next morning, Mary and Martha offered to run the store while Elizabeth made phone calls, trying to retrieve everything that had been sold from the Smucker estate. She thought about asking Anita if they could ignore a few items, like some embroidered pillowcases and several cast iron skillets. But in the end, Elizabeth decided to follow her instructions to the end and make sure that every T was crossed and every I was dotted. The pillowcases and skillets had been sold to Esther Vogel, a lovely Amish woman who lived on a farm a few miles out of town. Let me adjust my table here a little bit. Okay, I think that's going to be better. Yes, okay. Elizabeth was a lovely Amish woman who lived on a farm a few miles outside of town. Elizabeth planned to save her for last, since she couldn't call her. She dreaded asking Esther to return things that couldn't possibly be valuable. Taking a deep breath, she began making her calls. Thankfully, most people were very understanding, if a bit confused. Elizabeth didn't go into any long explanations. She just told them that Anna had changed her mind and had decided that she wasn't ready to sell anything right now. Most people took that to mean that she was struggling with her father's death, and they were very compassionate. But there were a few holdouts. Now, why in the world would Anita Smucker care if I have her mama's old sewing machine? Mabel Trumbull asked. Her mama died 10 years ago, and this thing sat there unused ever since she passed. I don't get it. Well, how do you know it was unused? Elizabeth said, trying to stay calm. Maybe Anita wants to sew something with it. I don't think so, Mabel sniffed. It took me 30 minutes to oil and loosen the gears so the poor thing would work. Is she going to pay me for my time? I don't know, Mabel. I can ask her. Elizabeth listened to a little grumbling before Mabel finally said, I'll drop it off at your place. Elizabeth quickly thanked her and hung up. She wasn't worried about most of the calls she had to make, but she didn't know what to do about Uriah Barnhart and Ruth Zook. Although Uriah wasn't Amish, it appeared as though he didn't have a phone. Or if he did, the number wasn't one she could find. Elizabeth worked until lunchtime and then left the house to check on her sisters. Martha pulled her aside as she walked into the old barn. We're doing fine, but people are beginning to talk about our request to return things from the Smuckers. I assumed it wouldn't take long, Elizabeth replied. Has anything been brought back this morning? Well, several items, Martha nodded. I've got them in the back. If you want to stay here and help Mary for a few minutes, I'll take them into the house. Sure, go ahead. Elizabeth sat down near the front register and waited for customers to bring their purchases. She'd only been there a few minutes when the door opened and Mabel came in, carrying the sewing machine. She plopped it down on the table where Elizabeth sat, and Elizabeth heard something snap from under the tabletop. The old wood table wasn't in very good shape. It wouldn't hold up under the weight of too many sewing machines being dropped on it. There you go, Mabel said huffily. That'll be $30. Elizabeth opened the register and counted out the money. Although she was certain Mabel had paid less than that, it wasn't the time to argue. Mabel grabbed her money and stormed out, almost running into Billy Richmond, who had just stepped inside the barn. Wow, she was in a hurry, he said to Elizabeth. It's a long story, not one I feel like talking about right now. I'm sorry. I understand. I'm not sure I want to hear it. He crooked his head toward the front door. I wonder if you'd step out here for just a few moments. I have something that might make things easier for you. What's going on? Mary walked up to the table after helping a customer. Billy has something outside he wants to show us. Elizabeth got up and walked out the door with Mary on her heels. What she saw stunned her. It was a long, L-shaped counter, fashioned in rich oak, polished and beautiful. It was breathtaking. I don't understand, Elizabeth said. What is this? When Billy smiled at her, Elizabeth noticed his face flushed a little. He was obviously embarrassed by the attention. Well, I noticed you were using an old rickety table for your register, and I wasn't at all sure it would hold up much longer. Thought maybe you needed something sturdier. But how did you find the time to make this? Mary asked, running her hand over the smooth countertop. Well, I started it back when we first began renovations. You told me about your plans to use a table at the front of the store. Figured you'd be happier with something like this. Elizabeth was dumbstruck. What do we owe you? She asked, hoping it wasn't too expensive. With the Smucker situation, money was not abundant. Owe me? Billy shook his head. I'd never build something without your permission and ask you to pay for it. Immediately, Elizabeth felt bad about her question. Before she could respond, Mary walked up next to him. My sister is very practical, Billy. She doesn't mean anything by what she said. She just doesn't want to take advantage of your kindness. Mary's words made Billy's smile return. He swung his gaze from Mary back to Elizabeth. It's a gift. I really want to see you all succeed. Down through the years, your dad and mom were very kind to me. He looked down at the ground, obviously trying to rein in his emotions. This is the least I could do for them and their daughters. You've already done so much, Billy, Elizabeth said, her voice shaking with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you. Before Mama died, you were always there for us, just trying to give back what was given to me. He said. Mary reached out and put her hand on his arm. Thank you, Billy. We receive it with gratitude. It is so beautiful. Yes, Billy, Elizabeth echoed. Thank you. I honestly don't know what to say. And for my sister, that is highly unusual, Mary said. Billy chuckled. Elizabeth noticed his expression as he gazed at Mary. He was clearly smitten. How did you get this here? Mary asked. Billy cocked his head toward his truck. My friend Ernest came with me. If you like it and want it inside, we'll move it in for you. Elizabeth and Mary said yes at the same time, causing all of them to laugh. Billy headed over to his truck and spoke to Ernest, who was sitting in the passenger seat. He got out and came over and picked it up. They picked it up straining. I can imagine something that heavy, they probably would. The men carried it inside the barn, while Elizabeth and Mary quickly removed their cash register and pulled the old table out of the way. The counter fit perfectly in the space they had. Martha, who'd been straightening the shelves, came jogging up to them. What in the world? Elizabeth quickly explained the wonderful gift to her sister. It's beautiful, Martha said softly. She smiled at Billy. Thank you. My mother would definitely approve. Billy nodded. Well, that means a lot. Your mama was a wonderful person. Yes, she was. Out of the corner of her eye, Elizabeth saw a woman looking at the kitchen appliances who appeared to need help. She grabbed Martha's hand and pulled her sister a few yards away from the couple. What are you doing? Martha asked, wrenching her hand out of her sister's. I'm trying to give Billy and Mary some time alone. I assume you approve. She's got to start meeting men who aren't anything like Brian. Well, of course I approve, but next time you might give me a heads up before you kidnap me. Well, it's hardly kidnapping. I'm just teasing you, Lizzie. Relax. She noticed the same woman Elizabeth had. Let me help that customer. Then I'd like a lunch break, if it's okay. Elizabeth nodded. Sure, but you might need to keep it short. I've got to go out this afternoon. Is it about Anita's stuff? Martha frowned. Elizabeth nodded. Yeah, I guess I'm going to need to pay personal visits to Uriah Barnhart and Ruth Zook. Uriah doesn't have a phone, and I feel I need to talk to Ruth in person. Well, I don't envy you with either one of them. Uriah's a little scary, and Ruth, well, I still don't believe she took that painting. I don't either. Well, how are you going to approach her? Elizabeth sighed and clasped her hands together. I don't know. I'll bring up the bracelet. And then I guess I'll just ask if she remembers the painting. Tell her that we've lost it somewhere. And I certainly have no intention of accusing her of anything. Well, do you want me to go with you? I wish you could, Elizabeth said, but I don't want to leave Mary by herself. Martha nodded toward their young sister, who was still talking to Billy. Maybe Billy could help somehow. Elizabeth put her arms around Martha and gave her a quick hug. I'm sure he'd be willing to do anything we ask, but this is something we need to take care of ourselves. Besides, I don't want to push things too fast between them. She still seems pretty fragile in the area of romance, no matter how slow a relationship might progress right now. So she let go of her sister and studied Billy and Mary a moment. He's a good man, though, isn't he, sis? Martha asked softly. Elizabeth smiled. I believe he is. I just don't know if Mary will allow him, or anyone, to get close. You're right. She has pretty deep scars from Brian. I know. Martha shook her head. I'd like to punch him in the nose. Elizabeth grinned at her. Not very Mennonite of you, sister. Well, when it comes to my family being mistreated, I don't feel very Mennonite. I feel like a mother tiger protecting her young. Elizabeth grabbed her hand. You don't have to protect me. Besides, you're still healing yourself. Have I ever told you how much I respect you? No, not lately. Well, I do, you know, and I love you too. Martha chuckled. Good combination. I'll take it. Her expression turned serious. I'll keep my cell phone close. If you need help this afternoon, you call me, okay? Elizabeth snorted. I'll be fine. I think I can take on an old man and a pastor's wife if I have to. Martha laughed and walked away. Although Elizabeth had made light of an awkward visits in front of her this afternoon, her stomach churned nervously. She didn't enjoy confrontation and prayed she could do what had to be done without creating enemies in her community. Next time we'll take up Chapter 7.